As EU interior ministers gathered inside the European Council, the aunt of a Syrian toddler whose drowning sparked international outrage stood outside calling for action.
Please save those refugees. Do something.
A plan to resettle 40,000 refugees among willing countries was agreed, but there was resistance to a proposal that would dramatically boost the number of refugees countries should accept.
On 120,000, we did not have the agreement we wanted. A majority of the member states are ready to move forward, but not all.
Some Eastern European member states had resisted the plan, but agreed to it in principle. Further discussions are planned early next month. They softened their criticism after Germany introduced temporary border controls, starting a domino effect that saw Austria, Slovakia and the Netherlands also suspend the Schengen passport-free rules. At the meeting, there was a clear attempt to restore order to an increasingly chaotic situation.
The EU plans to set up what are being called reception centres in the frontline countries of Italy and Greece, where new arrivals will be fingerprinted, identified and registered, while those deemed not to be genuine refugees will be quickly deported.
For large-scale resettlement to work, EU officials said clear policy distinctions were needed between refugees and economic migrants.
To say, let's shut all the borders and keep everybody out is unrealistic, populistic, and simply impossible. To say, let's open all the borders and let everybody in is equally unrealistic because it would seriously harm the European social model.
A donors' conference is also planned to boost European aid to the UN-sponsored refugee camps in countries bordering Syria.
Let's get more now from Jack Button, who joins us live from Brussels. Jack, it's been yet another round of disagreement as Europe seeks to deal with its enormous migrants and refugee crisis. What more can you tell us?
That's right. The main disagreement has surrounded this plan to add an additional 120,000 refugees to what is supposed to be a mandatory resettlement scheme. Altogether, it would bring the number up to 160,000. Poland, we are told, has softened its resistance, but there are still some Eastern European countries like Slovakia and Hungary and Romania which are still resisting the idea of this mandatory scheme, though they haven't completely ruled out an agreement at some point. There will be further talks somewhere down the track, and there is an in-principle agreement in place, but it's unlikely that we're going to see a mandatory agreement on this. But ministers did claim some victories yesterday, or at least some progress. They did agree to the resettlement of 40,000 refugees over the next 2 years. Of course, that's a very small figure if we consider Germany alone is this year expecting 1 million refugees. And they did agree to rush through with measures to better coordinate processing centres, to bring it under an EU umbrella so that all of the information, the registration of new arrivals is coordinated into one database, trying to again bring some control back into the EU's borders. And there was the announcement of that donors conference. The idea there being to raise funds for the United Nations to spend on those camps surrounding Syria, where about 4 million refugees are still waiting. They've seen their funding cut by about half over the past year. That's one of the reasons that analysts believe so many people are heading towards Europe.
So, Jack, what happens next as European leaders seek to contain this surging flow of migrants and refugees?
Now, this meeting of Interior Ministers, this was really just a starting point to discuss the Commission's plans because every day we're seeing greater numbers of people arriving. The situation has gotten out of hand on some of the borders, which is why we've seen countries like Germany, Austria, the Netherlands and Slovakia reintroducing controls at the borders in what is supposed to be the the Schengen open border scheme. So the biggest threat to the Schengen area since its inception 3 decades ago. So we've seen a robust debate in the Parliament today. That was attended by Federica Mogherini, the bloc's foreign policy chief. We're expecting another meeting in the days ahead that could be on whether to launch those military strikes in the Mediterranean. Other meetings are then expected in the weeks to come, leading up to yet another Interior Ministers meeting on October the 8th, where they are really hoping to get some sort of an agreement on that expanded resettlement scheme before a big leaders summit around the 14th of next month. And at that summit, they really want to have a full framework in place.
All right, Jack Button live for us in Brussels. Many thanks, Jack.